Hello, welcome back to Jorbs Scribbles on the Screen. Talks about every single thing in the Slay the Spire compendium. Today I'm talking about Carnage, an uncommon attack for Ironclad. It costs 2. It is ethereal, talk about that in a bit. It deals 20 damage and upgrades to deal 28 damage. And the first thing I have to say is, what is going on with this upgrade? That is obscene. 8 damage on an upgrade for 2-cost attack is just very high. It would be much more normal for you to get 4 to 6 more damage on an upgrade for a 2-cost attack. And Carnage starts out already hitting for 20. So that's already a high number for a 2-cost attack. Now, it's hard to compare this to any other Ironclad card all that cleanly, but it deals more damage than Perfected Strike, even if you have all of your strikes from the start of the game still in your deck, without you even having to upgrade it. And then it has a better upgrade than Perfected Strike would. A lot of the 2-cost attacks for Ironclad have area of effect, or they have debuffs attached to them or whatever. But in general, this card just deals more damage for lower cost than other Ironclad cards that you can reasonably have access to early on in the game do. And so in general, you're really, really excited to be taking a Carnage. In fact, the fact that... Okay, let's talk about Ethereal a little bit. So Ethereal is a mechanic where if a card is in your hand at the end of the turn, it will exhaust. So if you don't play the card, it will exhaust at the end of the turn. It's sort of like the opposite condition for happening from what a card with exhaust would have, where a card with exhaust, when you play it, it exhausts. A card with Ethereal, if you don't play it, it exhausts. So it's a really interesting mechanic. Sometimes you'll be sort of torn between whether to play your card with Ethereal or not. You might not want it to exhaust, but not really want to play it this turn. You might actually want it to exhaust, but also sort of want to play it this turn, so it can pull you in different directions. But when this card has Ethereal and you only have 3 energy and you draw it with Bash, you end up in a really awkward situation in the Lagavulin fight, or the Act 1 boss fight, for example. Or in Act 2 if you're stuck on 3 energy, perhaps. Where you really want to be able to play both Bash and Carnage. Because Bash Plus deals, unless you're getting vulnerable from some other source, Bash Plus is probably going to deal a comparable amount of damage to what Carnage does, if you do the math on how much that vulnerable is going to be worth over the next couple of turns. And so the fact that you can't play Bash and Carnage in the same turn is actually such a huge thing to me for Ironclad that it's one of the main things that I think about when I am choosing my whale reward, and I quite commonly do boss relic swap on Ironclad nowadays. At the beginning of patch 2.0, the boss relic pool was changed, and a lot of the boss relics that didn't give energy were taken out of the boss relic pool. Now, some of those boss relics that didn't give energy were actually somewhat okay boss relics, so the boss relic pool got stronger overall, I would say, but not necessarily incredibly, immensely more strong for all of the characters. But Ironclad's a character that really likes 4 energy, because Ironclad has lots of 2-cost cards available in Act 1, also starts with a 2-cost card, and in particular has interactions like this Bash plus Carnage interaction, where if you add a Carnage to your starter deck, you're going to draw it with Bash more than a third of the time, right? Yeah, something like that. And you're not going to be able to play both of them. And so Ironclad really likes getting to 4 energy. And I just wanted to point that out while talking about Carnage, because Carnage is such an influential card and how early game, even all of Act 2, honestly, works for Ironclad, that I feel like it's worth mentioning here. So, yeah, this card will probably not be bad in any fight until Act 3. I I would not expect when taking this card for it to be bad in any fight until I reached Act 3, at which point in a lot of decks it's actually still going to keep being good, and in a lot of the decks where it stops being actively good, the fact that it has Ethereal means you can draw it and not play it, and it gets out of the way of whatever thing you are doing that is better. Like, it gets out of the way of you drawing Limit Break lots of times, it gets out of the way of you going infinite with whatever, it gets out of the way of you stacking a bunch of block with Barricade and Entrench. So, as a card that's incredibly good for a very long time, even when it starts to not be that good, it self-exhausts, which is incredible. But yeah, this card's rad. I mentioned Necronomicon, I mentioned Neko-Eye in my notes. This card can go from being, you know, very, very solid to being actually completely nuts. So that's a thing to keep an eye on. And I also mentioned take this card. If you are being offered Carnage and skipping it a lot early on as Ironclad, I think there is probably something wrong happening. You might be putting yourself in situations where it's not right to take Carnage. You might be making the decision right in that moment, but probably you weren't meant to put yourself in a situation where it wasn't right to take Carnage. Probably you're like maybe taking cards like Clothesline and Uppercut too aggressively, and then you might look at Carnage and be like, well, I already have a Clothesline and an Uppercut. If I take a Carnage, I'm just gonna exhaust it because I'm gonna want to play the other ones. And like, no, you should not find yourself in that situation very often. Probably you're setting yourself up the wrong ways, because if you are offered a Carnage, you want to be able to take it and win like every fight up until the Act 2 boss off the back of what is a very strong damage card. It's not going to make you invincible. It doesn't block. It costs 2 energy and does damage, right? That's all it does. But it takes a long time in a Slay the Spire run before you get to fights which aren't heavily defined by your ability to efficiently turn energy and card draw into damage. And Carnage just efficiently turns energy and card draw into damage. Very efficiently. If I was on 3 energy, my tendency would be to upgrade Carnage over Bash. And the idea there is that I'm going to play Carnage Plus over Bash if I draw both of them in the same hand in fights like Sentries or Lagavulin or Gremlin Knob. It gets close. It depends what other attacks you have. Ideally, I will just have 4 energy. That will be nice. And in that situation, I probably also still upgrade Carnage over Bash. So do very, very highly value this upgrade. There are not many damage card upgrades that I take over the Bash upgrade early on as Ironclad, but 8 is a really big number. So thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the vid, and I'll see you next time.